Hello my lovelies, and welcome to my little cottage by the sea, the place where I love to stitch and craft my way to a vintage inspired and sustainable lifestyle. In this video, a very slightly bunged up and coldy me is going to be sharing my progress with sewing my dirndl. You might remember I put together a video where I was sewing this folkwear pattern and adapting it into the Lena Hoschek green dirndl dress, one that was worn in And Just Like That, and then also the wonderful Dita Von Teese was wearing it, and so many of you sent me that little clip and thought of me, which was very, very lovely, so thank you so much. My original intention had been to do this video in 2 parts, but I have got so into the whole process of sewing this dirndl, and I just knew that if I rushed to sew it, I wouldn't be so happy with it. So this is actually going to be a three-parter, rather than a two-parter. And in this video, I'm doing all the sewing of the dress up to the binding of the bodice, and before I actually put everything together. So all the elements are constructed in this video. I just have to put everything together. But before I show you that, I thought it was worth talking through the specific way in which I adapted this pattern, version B here, into the Lena Hoschek dress.
To create the Lena Hoschek style dirndl, as worn by SJP in AJLT, probably getting all of those letters muddled up, but anyway, I used version B, which is this one, and it was a much simpler hack than I anticipated. So here's the front of the pattern, and all I did was I lined up the underarm side seam apex. I knew I wanted to go from there, and I wanted to maintain this same line. So all I did was I folded that out the way, and then there was just this little bit of dart that I took off of here. So I just took that off and sweetened that line back. And then I needed to make obviously the side seam going onto the back fit. So went from there, and then I just folded that out of the way as well. I haven't done this terribly well, folded this terribly well here, but that's what I did. And then I measured the distance from here to here, and then where I'd folded on the back to the shoulder point, and that's what I used to start working out this detachable strap. And you want there to be a gap there, so I did it kind of at that length first, and then I've shaved bits off, so I knew that was going to fit. So that's what I did, very simple. And here's what the adapted pattern looks like. So this will go on there like that. Here's the gusset will go on there. I took off a bit of the gusset there, and then I've cut this so that I can have a zip in the centre back, so it goes like that. That's basically what the pattern looks like. So it was just a case of folding away this top part and creating the strap and working out where these eyelets are going to go. And I don't think I got them in the right place on the toile, but I'm going to have a look at that again.
As I've said, I have absolutely been loving sewing this project and really taking the slow path, which is how I want to approach all of my sewing now. I'm really sewing so much less than I used to, but I'm really enjoying the things that I'm sewing, and sometimes I put them to one side and they just have to sort of sit and tantalize me until I get the whim, the urge to sew them again. But now is the time to get on with sewing this, and one of the best parts really is getting all your fabric and all your bits and pieces together, spending a lovely leisurely couple of hours cutting things out, pinning the first little steps together, and then getting on with the first bit of sewing. So the skirt pattern was relatively straightforward. I've gone off-piste with this because I've gone off-piste with it. The dirndl's constructed in such a way that you can step into it and there's a sort of a gap at the front, and I didn't want to do that. I just used 2 widths of the fabric, the length that was appropriate for me, and I have put in pockets here. So I've sewn in pockets, and I just have used the selvage of the fabric to neaten the edge, although I haven't actually neatened around the pocket, so I probably do need to sit down and just bind that, because this fabric, a linen viscose, is probably going to be a little bit too frayy to just leave it, although the bit of me that wants to be lazy is wanting to leave it. So I have sewn it all, the front and then the 2 backs, divided that into the backs because I'm going to put a zip in this dress, and that brings me to sort of my first conundrum. So I bought this zip, which actually, when I think about the length of the bodice, which is quite low and actually sits quite low here, I think this zip's going to be too long, and also I'm not sure that I'm happy with the colour. You're not really going to see the zip. I'm going to sew it in with my preferred method, which is a centre lap zip, and you don't really see it. You might see it a tiny bit, you might see the pulley, but I don't know whether to use this zip because I've got it and maybe cut it down, or to do a cream zip or a black zip, because I've used the honeymoon fabric inside. So that's my first conundrum, and there is a conundrum number 2 which I'll talk through in a little bit.
Everything's cut out, and the first thing that I'm going to do is a bit of prep on the bodice. So here's the linen bodice, front and back, and then the lining, which doesn't need so much prep. So I'm just keeping those in pairs together. What I'm going to do first of all is on the front, I'm going to transfer the gusset placement. I've got to have a look at where I'm going to do some boning. Just going to do some minimal boning in this. Could go mad actually and really do a lot. And because this fabric is quite frayy, a linen viscose, I'm going to reinforce or stabilise the places that the eyelets are going to go into. So I've got to make a decision, more informed decision, about where the straps are going to set up here, and then use some interfacing, iron-on interfacing. I got this trick from my friend Miss Katie Corsets, who is an incredible corsetier, and she uses very, very thick iron-on interfacing in strips down where the eyelets are going to sit. So I'm going to see what I've got. Not a huge fan of interfacing, you may know if you hang out here with me sewing in my little cottage by the sea, but I'm sure I've got something somewhere, so I'm going to do that first. sewed the gusset in, and here are the instructions, which are beautifully illustrated, and actually if you do read it very carefully it does make sense. I sewed the toiles slightly differently to this, which worked okay, but I'm gonna really endeavour to do this exactly as it says. So I've ironed my gusset in half here, and what this is saying is this has got a like a 6mm seam allowance, I think, and what I'm going to do is line up that seam allowance, which you could actually draw on here, and match it up with that line. This is what I'm assuming it's telling me to do, and it does say that on the pattern that there's a star on the pattern piece, but actually I couldn't really see a star on the original pattern piece. Let's just find it and see. It's always worth double checking, because the original gusset pattern I just didn't trace out all the info. So it is 6mm, and there is this little star point indicated on the pattern. So I'm just going to transfer that to this. So just going to find 6mm just over. Probably better to move that out the way. And I will put this on the pattern as well. So there's 6mm there, and then here. And in future I would probably transfer this with the dressmaker's carbon, which I like to find in charity shops on my travels. So that star point would be here. So let's have a look, see. So that would line up. This line lines up with the carbon line. So I'm going to pin that in place. Just double check that you get the angle so that this little point here matches up with that apex there. So right sides together. So you do need this on the right side, because when that's sewn, that will have nice seams, and you do need to try and do it as neatly as possible. I don't know how neat I'm going to be, because I'm in a clumsy phase of my life, but I'm going to sew down that, and then we'll refer to the pattern and do the next bit.
Do you mind? I'm working on this. This is very important. This is very important. So do you mind, Mr. Ghost? Hey? Oh, she fluffer ghost. Have you given your blessing? You've given your blessing to the dirndl. What a good boy.
The sewing of this dirndl is actually really straightforward. So I'm using the techniques that are explained in the folkwear pattern, but I've gone off-pieced a tiny little bit. So the first thing I did was I sewed the front and back panels together, and then I sewed in the little gusset here, the booby gusset, and the idea is to then line the fabric, which I did in this vintage checkered cotton that I had, and I also made a lovely summer dress out of this quite a long time ago now, and I embroidered all the buttons. It's those little finishes that really make a project stand the test of time as far as I'm concerned. So I inserted the little gusset as the instructions stated. When I did my little calico one, I didn't sew them in very well, but I just followed the instructions. I marked the little points on the pattern and transferred them onto my pattern, and just following that process I sewed in my gusset really neatly. I'm so pleased with it. And then I backed the fabric and then just hand stitched the lining around this rather than inserting 2 gussets. I just sort of hand stitched that very neatly around the gusset there. And my next idea was that I was going to bone this. So the original Lena Hoschek dress is actually boned. So I did sew in all the channels for it, and I have a very narrow boning to put in this, but because this fabric is quite thin, quite flimsy, it just looked really weird. It just did not look right putting the boning into this, and it made the sort of the bodice sit a bit strangely on the body. It sort of curved. I know those boning, the idea of it is that it ends up sort of moulding a bit to your body, but I think this fabric is just a little bit too it's not sturdy enough basically. So I've left those out, and then the next thing I did was I created the facing for the where the eyelets are going to go. So this isn't going to be a corseted structured dress in the way that I intended, and I think I'd like to give that concept a go, but maybe in fabric that's going to be a little bit more suitable for it.
What I've done here is I've got some of my favourite Liberty Honeymoon fabric, and I'm just creating a little facing at this centre front. I've cut this 6 centimetres wide. This is not part of the folkwear pattern, this is just what I'm doing, and then I'm going to top stitch that down, and then the eyelets will go here, and I'm doing that now so that I can bias bind the top all the way along the top edge of the bodice. I really did go awry there, but never mind. These are indicating where those eyelets are going to go, so this is going to be sewn on, and then bias bind the top. I haven't worked out how I'm going to finish this edge. Probably bias bind it and then put the zip in. But I'm going to do all the eyelets and everything before I put this bodice onto the skirt. Just because it's just much easier in pieces. And I'm awful at doing eyelets. But because I bought a bigger size eyelet, I can't use my friend's eyelet machine. She's got a proper one for corsets.
So the next bit was to sew this on, and I've used my beloved honeymoon fabric so that it echoes the sort of the inside of these strap pieces that I will talk about in a minute. And I've just sewn that on and turned it through to the wrong side, pressed it in place and stitched it, just edge stitched it down. And then the final step with this is to sew the binding. So I created binding out of the green fabric. You could do a contrast binding, which looks really beautiful. You could do decorative techniques, but I feel this kind of zingy, pea greeny, jade green dress is probably statement enough. So I had a lovely time sewing the binding on, and I actually chose to, where possible with this project, to hand stitch everything down. So all the binding around the two fronts here, so there's two fronts, as you can see, like this, so you can see them here. So it's going to sit like this, and when this is done up, it will stretch round, and the binding just neatens it off. So actually, even though there are some quite fine little sewing processes that you need to practice and do, the end result is really fabulous. So I'm ever so pleased with this. I think actually, just a thought that has occurred to me is that if I'd actually not interfaced, but I had backed the fabric with maybe some calico, that would have given me the sturdiness to be able to do the boning. Didn't think of it at the time. Can't be clever all the time, can we? I then transferred the positions of the eyelets, which I have here. So I bought, which now I can't see or read anything, so these are 5mm silver ones, and I kind of wanted gold really with this green, but then when you put the silver near the honeymoon fabric, which is on the inside, you're not going to see it. So I'm not really sure why my brain is thinking this, but actually the silver goes quite nicely with this. So maybe just the idea that I know it's there is going to be enough. I am absolutely rubbish at inserting eyelets. I think there are 40 in here, so I'm going to need one here and one, two, four each side, and then the ones at the front. So I'm hoping that I've got enough. I'm really lucky because my dear friend has just donated me all her old leather crafting tools and accessories, and in that there is actually a proper like press to do things like rivets, and I'm presuming you can do eyelets on there. It's got like the industrial strength dye and so on, because when I do these by hand, even though I've watched loads of YouTube videos, I've looked in books, I've really sort of tried to do a good job with these eyelets, I never seem to do a good job with them. I don't know if it's the make prim, I don't know if you have any suggestions of a really good make, or what I find is that they always end up coming out, and then sometimes they can actually rip the fabric and it sort of ruins the garment, which I really don't want to do with this. And I think that's probably why it's taken me a bit of time to get back into sewing this, because I'm slightly dreading this. But now I've got that equipment, I'm hoping that that will give me a much better finish and make me feel a bit more confident about this. But of course I will be practicing. And these are not cheap. These were £9.25 for these, so it's not something that you can just sort of practice a dozen times and then go for it. You've sort of, I feel like they're more costly than it's worth sort of just being flippant with. I don't know if any of that made sense whatsoever. This cold is really getting to me now. So I really loved doing these little doodly strap things. They're just totally bound all the way round. It was very, very satisfying. There'll be a eyelet here, and then this will wrong way round. Hold on a minute, let me get the right one. That will help. So then this will sit here like this. Got to use our imaginations just ever so slightly, and then this will tie to here. Now this is where my second conundrum is, because I cut out loads and loads of the binding here. There's plenty left, and my idea was that I was going to create the ties out of this, but because it's this sort of toothy linen, it's really, really difficult to turn through, and also to get a fine enough finish. So what I've done in the interim is I've bought some cotton, and it's a good match for the colour. In real life this is not looking as well matched as it is on camera. But my idea was that I would plait this and create a sort of a cord, and then that would be the fastening, the tie here, and then also at the front, and it might look really, really fabulous. And then I can do some sort of little bells and tassels on it and really make something of it. It's just a cotton by, you know, it's like a crochet cotton, I think, by Anchor. And, you know, it's probably good enough. But for some reason, like this zip, which, you know, on camera, they're all looking quite complimentary and good enough. In real life, in the light up in my studio, which is a little bit dark today, there's just something a little bit hesitant about my thinking around this, because I either want them to be perfect matches or to do some kind of contrast. That's what my sort of way of doing that would be. So I would contrast with black ribbon and black zip and so on. But I think I'm going to give this a go, because it's not really detrimental to the end product, is it? It's not something that's sewn in and you can't replace, because what I could do is I could start when I'm out and about on my travels, maybe go to Vivi Rouleau in London when I'm next there, because that is really the place for ribbon, and see if they've got a really good match to it. So I think that with this, it's good enough. I'll give it a go. With the zip, I really, really would appreciate your feedback and what you think, because I don't know why it's such a sort of a block. But anyway, there have been these sort of 3 bits of the process here that have been a little bit of a kind of like, they've scuppered my plans a little bit. So I'm just going to forge ahead, but do let me know about the zip. So that's where we're at, and that's where I'm going to leave this part 2 of sewing Sarah Jessica Parker's iconic green dirndl dress. In the next video, I will put everything together and do the finishing touches, make the little cord with this. Hopefully, fingers crossed, do a good job with those eyelets, because that's kind of going to be the ruination of the dress if I don't. And then I'm going to show you some ways in which I'm styling this, and also my dirndl obsession is reignited now that I'm sort of at the home stretch of sewing this one, and I've got rather a lot of dirndl action on the horizon, which I would really like to share with you. So next video is finishing this, showing you this and some styling ideas, ways in which I'm going to be wearing it through the winter, and then some other dirndl things that I would actually like to make. I have got a dress actually that is the one of these, this one, that is in process as well. So there'll be a lot of dirndl action in the next part, which will come to you much sooner, with less of a divide of time, an ocean of time between part 1 and part 2. Part 3 should be with you anon. As ever, my lovelies, I really do appreciate you taking the time to spend the time with me here in my little cottage by the sea, and I'm absolutely flabbergasted to find that there are 11,000 of you now, which beyond my wildest dreams I never ever would have thought would be the case when I started this channel 5 years ago in the middle of the pandemonium. I'm really, really grateful for each and every one of you, and I really, really cherish all the support and all of your kind words that you send my way on a very regular basis. I really do feel very lucky to be part of this wonderful community. Wherever you are in the world, my lovelies, I hope you're taking very good care of yourself, and I shall see you very soon. Bye.